The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Beautiful, Tristan. Thank you.
You're welcome, Brian.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to The Winemakers. This is Brian Casey. We've got sort of an unusual show today. Sam is out in the field down in Southern California. John Myers is on assignment somewhere. Bart Hansen is on his way. And Tristan Scholl, who some of you have heard on some of the previous podcasts, especially if it's involves anything Italian, is here with us today. So, and special guest today, we've got Martha Stoumen, which I have wanted to have you on the show for a long time. And I think it was when Isa came and she was on the show one day, and I probably mentioned your name, and she said, "Oh, if you want, I can give you her contact info," which is probably your worst nightmare when you have someone reach out to you through someone else.
It's great. I love it. I love it. I know. I'm trying to think about the other day, I'm going to do a talk in January, and they said, "Oh, maybe we can all put up our LinkedIn profiles after." And I was like, "Oh, I don't really check LinkedIn." And they're like, "Well, maybe email." And I'm like, "I'm really pretty bad at email. I love connecting with people, but I'm like,
Right.
Maybe I just need to give everyone my cell phone number and just tell me, like, text me."
Yeah, I don't know if that's a smart idea.
Not a good strategy.
And LinkedIn is, I've never been on LinkedIn, but I've heard it's sort of become the new Facebook, where it's where professionals go and then they start conversations. And I don't know that you want to get into that.
Yeah. I don't know.
If you've never had Martha's wines before, I think I first had your wines when I was working at the Fairmont. I would work nights. I would get off work, and at the time I was doing a lot of my wine shopping at a place called Bottle Barn in Santa Rosa, where a nice gentleman named Barry, shout out Barry, I know he listens to the show. I saw him last week. And so I would pick up bottles that I had never had before. I've kind of figured out that Bottle Barn is more for industry people than actual consumers of wine. When I'm in there, I tend to run into a lot of people that I know from, that are winemakers or distributors. But I was totally intrigued by your labels at first. They caught my eye. And then it was the use of sort of more unique varietals. And then I brought the wines home. And when you're working in a restaurant, sweating, and you get off at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, you come home and everyone would be asleep at my house. And I had a little man cave situation set up in my garage. And I would go out there and maybe possibly smoke a joint and open up a bottle of wine. What I was looking for was in your bottles. I want things that are fresh and lively and have acidity to them and were refreshing. And so I kind of fell in love with your wines. I think the first one was the first wine that I had was a honeymoon. I think it was 2018. Mm-hmm. And you're still doing Colombard and Chardonnay. Okay, cool. Yes. Does that blend ever change on here?
The very first year it was Colombard and Roussanne, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Which was very delicious. But I moved towards the Colombard Chardonnay because I still have this thing where I'm trying to figure out where Chardonnay fits into California for me. It's, a beloved grape, one of my makes some of my favorite wines, but I was also kind of equally not hated, that's too strong of a word, but loathed, I suppose, in California. And so I feel like I love honeymoon. I love this blend we're about to drink, but it's I'm still feel like I'm trying to like twiddle the knobs a little bit in terms of like how Chardonnay can show up in California. And I think the Colombard, it's primarily a Colombard, is really one of the ways.
Dude, what is it about? So, we all know what it is that people sort of talk about. What they don't like nowadays is the use of, it's 100% malolactic fermentation and then new French oak.
Yeah.
But Chardonnay to me is kind of like transparent and neutral in a lot of ways. Like it can be made in a lot of different styles, maybe depending on where you're growing it. But I think it's freaking delicious. And so, I hope you figure out whatever it is that you want to do in your style.
No, Chardonnay is incredible. I mean, it's like, I often think about it as a grape that I would liken to meat, where the Chardonnay is a grape that has it can, depending on where it's grown and how it ferments, but like the most amazing lees. So it's like, how you bring in the bones when you're working with meat or like broth. I think about that with Chardonnay. Like, okay, how do we bring in the bones? Like kind of a whole grape. I don't know how else to think about it, but it's incredible. But it's site specific. And I think in California, because we, I feel like Chardonnay often shines best when it's on some like pretty dramatic soils. So like whether it's, we think of calcareous soils in France, where some of the versions I love are grown, but also I made early on a Chardonnay, very first year making wine for myself in 2014 from the base of Mount Lassen, and they were all these like iron-rich volcanic soils, which was incredible. That vineyard has now been pulled out, but old plantings of Chardonnay. I don't know. So I sometimes think there's like this kind of textural mineral like X factor that you find in Chardonnay that like really depends on the soil. So if you don't have it, if you're growing it on maybe sandy soils or loam soils, what are the things you do to layer in some of that complexity, whether it's blending it with other grapes or...
Well, and then there's this movement to move out towards the coast too, where you have, Jasmine Hirsch or Ross Cobb or people that are like literally like 3 miles from the ocean. And those are a little like leaner styles of Chardonnay, but you would probably not want to be out there. You like hotter sites.
I do. I like warmer sites, and it's because of the farming that you can achieve there.
Right. So hold on. Let's start. Let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning.
Are you a Sebastopol born and raised?
Well, I was born in Marin, but when we were living in a little cottage in Mill Valley, but my parents bought the property when I was born and started building a house. So we were, as far as I can remember, we were living in a trailer when my dad was building a house. And then...
At what age were you?
When we kind of moved up here, I was 4 when we like finally moved. So that's what I remember. A few things from Mill Valley. But.
And so you say was the plan to have a piece of property where you guys could have animals or?
It was, the property I grew up on was just shy of 2 acres. So we could have, we were surrounded by goats. Every person around us had goats. Some people had sheep. There was horses. So, I'd hop the little fence and go hang out with the farm animals, but we didn't have any ourselves. But we had, our property was part of an old apple orchard that's over 100 years old that was, divided into 3, and most of the trees were on our property. So that's what I grew up doing, was picking, pruning.
Gravensteins?
Some Gravensteins for sure, a bunch of different things. Unfortunately, when my parents put in the driveway, and I don't think we knew this, they pulled out the crab apple tree, which I didn't quite... I've now later learned that, it's such a great pollinator, and if you are going to make cider, it's the perfect kind of complement to the...
Well, and a lot of the apples, I think the last or the second to last apple company moved up to Washington at some point this year. So I grew up in Petaluma, and my daughter went to school in Sebastopol for preschool and elementary and middle school. But I remember as a kid, lots of apple orchards out there, and then slowly it seemed like they were getting replaced by vineyards over time.
Yeah, I remember leaving to go... So I grew up in Sebastopol, went to high school there, went away for college, and I remember even coming back to visit my parents, 4 years later. This is around, early 2000, and coming back, and just every year, the number of vineyards that were being put in was incredible. Yeah. And so when I fell in love with winemaking, and my friends, who grew up with me, and I told them that that's what I wanted to do, they were like, some of them, were involved with, land preservation and things like that. And they were like, what are you, you're going to go to,
problem.
You're part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, but there are ways to grow grapes that is not, as negatively impactful to the environment.
Monoculture.
Yeah.
So did you play sports?
I did. My love was soccer, but I only played that seasonally. I did swimming year round. That's what my older brother did. And
you were on a swim team?
I was on a swim team. Yeah. My great aunt kindly, I found out later after she passed, that she paid for it for us, sponsored us the whole time, which was very sweet.
Where did you swim in Sebastopol?
At Ives Pool.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, the sea serpents.
Yeah. My daughter's in 4-H still in Sebastopol, and so we go right there for our meetings.
Yeah, 4-H is amazing. I had a early, I guess, call him a boyfriend in 7th grade who raised pigs, and I remember going out and exercising the pigs with him. And
what do you do to exercise pigs?
You basically just whack them in the butt with a stick, chase them around.
There's no treadmill.
It's okay. They like it.
Yeah, very
okay.
Lo-fi.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of great out there. I don't know. Sebastopol has definitely changed over the last, even in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And so you're not currently living in Sebastopol?
No, I live in Santa Rosa.
Okay.
I love Sebastopol, but affordability, just especially having a kid. And honestly, we were looking for a home in Sebastopol, and besides the main thing was we couldn't afford it, but the secondary thing was we'd go into neighborhoods and we wouldn't see any other kids, and it was kind of I have a single child, and I was like, I want a little more of a community for him and me. And
we were looking out there too. My daughter's best friends are triplets, and they were living out in Sebastopol, but we found that it was either get a brand new house and no land, or you got some land and then you had to do some work. And I'm not a construction person.
I was kind. My younger brother, my dad is a contractor, was a builder growing up, and then my younger brother does earth moving and concrete work and stuff.
Oh, so you were set up.
Yeah, exactly. But I absorbed none of it, I realized. And it was very kind. There was a few houses we looked at that my younger brother, who has 4 kids and runs a business and has no time, but he would come out and crawl underneath the house and check it out for me. It's really sweet.
Being under a house, I think I talked to you about this a couple weeks ago. It's one of the most terrifying things. It's almost like being at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
You're going to see things that you've never seen on land before. It's dark as hell.
Yeah.
And you're just worried to if you ever scuba dive at night, you're always afraid you hear noises, but you're afraid to point your flashlight in the direction you heard the noise because you're afraid of what you might actually see. That's how I feel
terrifying.
crawling under houses. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. No, not for me. Definitely not for me.
So do you go to college right after
I did.
high school?
I loved where I grew up. So I wasn't, and a lot of, I feel like high school students, there's this thing where, they're like, oh, I can't wait to get out of this town. Yeah. Which I didn't feel, but I was very excited to explore more than like, good riddance, let me leave this all behind. Right. But I was like, I want to go to somewhere that's different. So I went down to UCLA. I remember riding my first public bus.
Was this on a swim scholarship?
No.
Okay.
No. I was never that good. I was never that dedicated.
What was your stroke anyway?
Breaststroke.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm a shorty.
You're a badass then.
So.
It's a tough stroke.
It is, but I loved it. That was the one thing. Yeah. And no, I went down just for academics, I guess, but was very undecided, and I ended up studying geography and environmental studies. I've met a lot of winemakers who studied geography, because I feel like it's kind of this, it's like a generalist's, interest in science and environment and maybe a little bit of anthropology, but not full into it.
Yeah.
So,
and geology and
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of, I guess. But anyway, I there was a professor named Judith Carney who, her work was focused on rice cultivation and how rice came over to the Americas, and kind of debunking some of these myths that, it came from the East, and, through looking at early tools in the rice cultivation in the U.S., she was showing that this was slave knowledge, and this was, African knowledge, and this should be taught about in this way, and not, kind of how it had been covered up and mythologized in various ways. Anyway, but there were other parts of like how agricultural systems came to be and how they flowed throughout humanity, and some for very dark reasons, clearly, and some for other, reasons of. I think I personally didn't really like history growing up, but then when I saw this side of it, where I was like, oh, I love the food system part of it, or like, okay, don't tell me, sure, this war happened on this date. Mm-hmm. Not that interested in why this political power wanted to go out and massacre people, but this whole like side effect of this, food stuff being brought into these homes, or this religion and that religion meeting and their foods being exchanged, like all that was very interesting to me. So got more into like, okay, what are these traditional farming systems and how have they traveled around the world? And I minored in Italian too, so that was kind of.
And what was the reason for that?
I don't know. My grandfather was Italian, who I never met. I think my mom, she always said, sorry to the Brits out there, she's half British, half Italian, but she was like, I kind of just wish I was full Italian. So I heard
that. It is more romantic than British.
It is a little bit. But I don't know. I think her talking about it, and I just always had this desire to explore, and I just thought the language was beautiful. I tried to learn French when I was 10, and it didn't really stick. So I don't know. I guess the Italian.
What were they teaching in school in Sebastopol when you were there?
There was a French class, and there was a couple Spanish classes. Yeah. Although the Spanish was taught by a woman who spoke English the whole time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
No immersion at all.
There was no immersion at all. Yeah. I learned very little to nothing. But
the Peggy Hill method.
Yeah. But language didn't come easy to me, but it always felt like something like I was like, oh, if I want to like figure out this key, because it will unlock, so much more interaction with humans.
Tell us a little bit about the wine, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Glorious.
FYI.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. So I brought the 2021 honeymoon. Yeah. So I've been thinking about, I think about ageability of rosés and whites often. I mean, everyone thinks about reds. So, but not that this is that age, but I did a vertical with the honeymoon recently. The 2018 vintage you had, 17 was the first vintage I made, and then through to today. And I just found that, I don't know, the earlier I went back, the more interesting and exciting I thought things were. And I really love, I guess it's just not much a part of our wine culture is aged rosés. So, especially if you're making things, low to no sulfite, I think people think, oh, we should drink this fresh. And they're beautiful fresh, but I don't know. I like things after a couple years.
Well, in French, it's not unusual to have an older rosé, but for me, working in restaurants, people always wanted, for Sauvignon Blanc and rosé, they always wanted like the newest thing.
Yeah. But I think there's, needs some time to kind of integrate.
Yeah.
But Colombard, so honeymoon is 65% Colombard in the 2021 version. It varies based on the vintage. 35% Chardonnay, and Colombard was something I was always interested in from like a historical perspective in California. There's a lot of grapes that were brought over because they were high yielding when they were young, which was yield was obviously more important in the early days of California viticulture. And then some of these vines, these are not pre-Prohibition. These were planted just after World War II in the 1940s.
Oh,
still
cool.
Quite old. Yeah. And I think about how amazing it is these vines that, yes, were high yielding when they were young, but as they settled into old age, I'm fascinated with old vines. You know, they have this really deep root structure. Many of them are dry farmed, so I like the environmental aspect of that, but also just from a wine quality perspective. And it's so hard to find old vine whites. Yeah, it's hard to find old vine vineyards, period. But.
Well, it's so funny that people now want to drink more Chenin Blanc and French Colombard, and you want to tell them, well, we used to have all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It takes
and then
decades.
It all got ripped out because everyone wanted to plant Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the Colombards from Rossetti Vineyard, which is Pamela and Tom Rossetti. They're second generation. So Tom is... Sorry, Tom, if I botched this or if you didn't want me to tell people, but I think he's 81 now. And he helped plant these vines when he was a little kid.
Wow.
Like, you know, kids were working in the vineyards day one.
That was your labor force.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's pretty incredible to think about that, you know, he planted these vines and has been caring for them ever since. And it makes amazing fruit. You know, Colombard... people say is a blank canvas, which I understand. I think it's more of a textural, subtle grape, but the thing I love about it for California, and especially as we get into kind of years where climate's doing all sorts of crazy things, is Colombard, it never really spikes in sugar.
Oh, interesting.
And it holds on to acidity. So you have... As a winemaker, you just feel like you have breathing space, to be creative. And we've picked Colombard. It's been the first grape that's come in more when we want like a brighter, almost chocolatey style wine. Or we pick it for honeymoon as the last grape, so it can hang on the vine. And it gets it gets kind of this more honeyed character. Yeah.
I think the only other French Colombard that I've had is Patrick Cappiello's from Monterio cellars. Is the only other one I can think of.
He worked with this fruit one year, so we were working out the same space, and he was asking.
Okay, so I was curious about that. Yeah. Were you making wines at PAX for a while?
I was.
Okay.
Yes.
So you were part of a cool little crew out there. We were always a little bit jealous of what you guys were doing in there in Sebastopol, because you had like this cool little, it was almost like a tech startup where you had these cool people playing around with the interesting grapes and doing unusual things, and Rosalind's like doing a Pinot Noir plum co-fermentation, and we kind of wish we had something like that around here. So are you not making wines there anymore?
This is my first vintage not making wines
there. Okay.
So I moved over to a custom crush space in Sonoma for the time being.
Oh, who?
Just Sonoma Valley Custom Wine down on 8th Street East.
Okay, cool. Hey, you're with us.
Yeah, exactly.
You're with the rest of us in Sonoma. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
So I'd been making post-sortation wines there because the PAX space in Sebastopol is amazing, but it's not huge. And so
I was wondering, because you're aren't you at like 1,400 cases or something at this point? Or are you even?
I'm a little bit more than that. It fluctuates year to year. I would say currently around about 5,000 cases.
I was wondering if you outgrew the space for them.
So in 2018 was the first year I worked there, and I made the post-sortation wines there, which are slightly larger cuvées, still pretty small, but they're not like 100 case lots or anything like that.
Oh, and I said 1,400. I was thinking 14,000. I thought you made around 14,000.
No. I'm more around 5. I think we've gotten up to 7.5 in our peak, and then kind of fluctuated back and forth depending on yield and market and all those things. But
years like this year where, because we're attached to Enterprise Vineyards Management, you had people that were turning down fruit this year. And so we were always, and then you go to Sonoma Market and there's someone in the parking lot that's like, hey, you looking for any Tempranillo? Are you looking for any Chenin Blanc or something? You always get people that tempt you sort of during harvest. And so you can add on to your portfolio if you want.
I've had to tell my assistant winemaker, Tim Lyons, who's been working with me since 2018. I'm just like, don't let me buy any excess fruit this year. It's because it's tempting, you know, if the vineyard's amazing and there's a creative
winemaking is addictive.
God, yeah.
Yeah. Who wouldn't want to play around with something fun and new?
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure. But
okay, so you moved everything over here. I'm sure they miss you at the PAX facility, because I know the way they talked about you was they all love you.
Yeah. No, I miss them too. I miss all of them. We still did a harvest lunch there. We celebrated Tim's birthday there we do a grilled cheese gamay lunch.
Awesome.
Yeah, which is really fun. And yeah, I still visit from time to time, but I miss them. And I miss Rosalind. She was like a tight buddy of mine.
I think she might have been one of the people that we had on during the pandemic. I was so curious about her wines. She was doing some fun stuff. And then I remember that's right. She happened to mention when she was on the show how she used to work in the lab at Gallo.
I know.
Did she ever tell you this?
No, she did, but it's something that I kind of just like put in the back of my brain.
And how she was doing experimentation with like yeast strains that had different flavor profiles and stuff like that. And she kind of said it in like passing. And I was like, hold on, put on the brakes.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? What are they doing in the labs at Gallo? And she's like, well, I'm not sure if I'm really allowed to talk about it.
Nobody knows.
And she's like, well, we never really used them to make wine. And I said, yeah, but then why would you be experimenting with them if the end goal was not to somehow end up in the wine? So I always wanted to dig in a little bit deeper, but she seemed a little bit like,
maybe proprietary, but I'm sure they're developing them for the wine, of course.
100%.
Yeah. So, it's different. It's a different model. Gallo's trying to control the process and make sure everything is, I don't want to say consistent, because I think a lot of winemakers want consistent quality, but everything is
consistent flavor
homogenous.
Profiles. But
Really,
that's the thing that sort of that annoys me about a lot of, especially the Cabernets that are growing over in Napa. It seems like everyone's using a commercial yeast strain that gets fermentation ripping right away, finishes fermentation quickly, because there's a lot of money invested in those. And then they're manipulating the wines to make sure that if you came to our tasting room 3 years ago, like the wine, we want to make sure that every year the wines we're sending you in Idaho or Kentucky, wherever you live, are tasting very similar to those wines, so that, because we know it's pleasing to your palate.
Yeah.
And there's no story of the vintage or story of the vineyard.
Yeah. There's definitely a division, and I think core philosophy there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's part of the message we do here, when we have people who are like, our 15 is not going to taste like the 17 or the 19 or the 21.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
It's about diverse, like the human experience. And, I personally love that about wine, is that it's, a kind of a diary of place and time.
It's a snapshot.
That will continue to develop, Yeah.
It's a poem in a bottle. So when you leave, did you graduate UCLA?
I did. And I immediately went to work on a farm in outside of Siena in Tuscany. That was like,
and so how does that happen?
Well, a friend of mine from college had gone and worked and done a little hospitality with them. Okay. They do, half the farm is like a learning center. They have a nonprofit part of their business and a for-profit part of their business. And then there's the agriturismo part.
And the for-profit funds the nonprofit? Is that the idea?
Technically, but I think the nonprofit actually the programming cost more than what they brought in. So I think there was also some assistance from the Italian
outside
government.
Sources,
Yeah, which that would be nice.
Well, not unusual in other countries, seems
Totally.
to be. And here we basically just are subsidizing people that are, corn?
Yeah, exactly.
Soy.
I know.
That ends up in our food.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing I was, learned about in college and got very just... Yeah.
And is your Italian good enough at this point where you're basically able to talk with people there?
I would say it was probably. I haven't been to Italy actually now for 10 years since I started the business. But when last time I was there, I I would never claim fluency because I
Right.
learned it later in life, but
Right.
you know.
And what do
definitely
they do? Do they put you in a little like, like a little ohana? Like they have little units for employees?
Yeah. So this internship, they had converted an old stable to an old stone building. It basically looked like a castle to me when I was there, a small castle. But the main building, it was, Italy, man, for the Italian history buffs out there, I might botch this a little bit, but there was a system that Italy was basically under the sharecropping system in a lot of places until like the 1980s. So this castle was like, whatever, I'm forgetting all the terminology, but basically the padrone, and then, families would live on the land.
Right.
And so it converted straight from this to an agriturismo, which is just crazy to think about. Like,
how did that happen? Someone, it wasn't the same people that owned it.
Somehow, a family member inherited it who lived in Maine, I think, or maybe she was part Italian, married an American. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it was passed down, and they were like, "Well, what do we do with this property now?"
Right.
And so
let's wash away our sins.
Yeah, it was actually interesting. One of the women who did a lot of the cooking in the kitchen, she was a child in the sharecropping system, and then became an employee. But yeah, it's anyway, they converted the stables to intern housing. And
cool. How many of you were like living on the property at one time?
There's probably about 10 interns.
And it was all young people like yourselves that were.
Yeah. The farm's called Spinocchia. Check it out. They still do this intern program. It's amazing. Talk about incredible. You would get, at least the time I was there was a once a week Italian class in the afternoon. And then every other Friday, you'd get to go on a field trip to another local farm or maker. Like we went to visit a saffron farmer. We went to, a pecorino maker. It was really very cool.
And are you actually making money, or you're just being set up with room and board and
it's room and board.
And then knowledge?
Yeah. And we would make all the pizzas every Wednesday for the staff. We'd help out with the cooking. I mean, we were harvesting the vegetables. I was in the vineyard and the olive orchard. So, helping with harvesting the olives and the grapes and making wine. So a lot of.
But was that when you went there? Were you expecting to get thrown into the vineyard and start making wine?
I was. So you it was like you list your top 3 choices of where you'd want to work, whether it's with the animals, in the vineyard, olive orchard, and. I guess the wine part sounded romantic.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I said, I'll put that as my first choice. I can't even remember what my second or third was.
Well, and what kind of varietals did they have on the property?
They had some of the traditional Tuscan varietals, so Sangiovese, Canaiolo, Colorino, Trebbiano, but there was a mixed block of ancient vines that nobody knew what it was. It was a mixed red and white block.
Oh, cool.
Which was cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And
did you ever figure it out, or you just threw it in with the rest of the grapes?
Threw it into the rest of it. Even maybe they've gotten a DNA typed by now, but at the time, even the locals didn't know what the grapes were. So it's fun. It was a great time. Yeah. Huge fig trees. I ate figs to my heart's content.
And did you actually get to harvest the olives and press them and make them into olive oil?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Oh yeah, definitely. And after the olive harvest, I remember being in one orchard and they set up a little grill, and it was just toasting bread with the fresh olive oil and putting this like really thinly sliced guanciale, which is the fat of the.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
And that oil, when it's first pressed, has got a little heat to it.
Oh, so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Really great living.
And so how long were you there?
I was there that trip for 5 months, but I think I was only at the farm for about 3 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're there, are you planning your next move?
I was there to escape getting a real job after college. Yeah. I was like, I liked UCLA, but I was just like, this feels like a machine. It's so expensive. Just feeling kind of a little bit like I imagine a lot of young people feel today where you're like, how do I make this work?
Yeah.
Everything seems way too expensive. How do I,
Well, and the student loans are piling up, and you're thinking,
exactly.
okay, now I have to go sell my soul to try and pay these off by the time I'm 40 or 50 years old.
Still paying student loans. I'll raise my hand there. And I feel lucky, it was not as expensive as it is.
Didn't Joe Biden just do another round of forgiveness?
I think so. I signed up for that, but
Did you?
I haven't gotten
My sister got hers taken care of.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe because I'm on that cusp of like, it wasn't so, like I may actually be through most of my interest payments. And that's fine. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm on the tail end. I'm an elder millennial, I guess.
Yeah, we were back in Ohio for a family gathering a few months ago, and my sister was telling one of our relatives that lives there about how she had her loans forgiven, and they had a real problem with it.
Okay.
Like, that's not fair. Why should you get to have yours forgiven? And then there's other people that are paying them back. And I'm like, I don't know. She's my sister. I'm glad she's getting out from under.
I have to say, even if mine never got paid back, I am so happy for those who are. I mean,
yeah, it's oppressive.
It's oppressive. It feels like usury, honestly.
I think people at that age don't really understand the ramifications of what it actually means. Because that was, what they were saying is, oh, well, what, you didn't know when you signed for it that you were going to have to pay it back? And it's like, well, what are you thinking when you're that age? You just really want to get in and get your life going.
Totally. Well, and you also sometimes, a lot of people, I don't know if they feel like there's that much of a choice or if it's kind of like the lesser of two evils. Like, sure, I'll pay a lot of money, but hopefully this will pay off in the long term. And that's the goal. But even less than that of like the being young and not understanding what's happening, which we don't, and we have to learn those lessons in life. But I feel like it's like, if something's crippling society, if it means that we don't have teachers, we don't have people who are working in like really important but low paying jobs,
right,
because of student loans, like that's a problem for our society on the whole. And I feel like everyone should care about that, whether or not they've gone to college, whether or not they had student loans.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
So how do you get off of this farm then? Do they kick you off? Do they finally say, hey, you've been here long enough, you need to move on?
I had already overstayed. I just was on a tourist visa. 90 days.
It's 90 days.
90 days. So I had already overstayed that by a couple months. But, it was back in the day where everything was like still paper. There was no like electronic trail.
Right. No one's showing up in a van to take you away.
Yeah.
Right.
But I did feel like, okay, time to move on. And what did I do? Well, someone visited the farm and they asked me, they said, oh, are you doing this internship so you can become a winemaker? Yeah. And I was like,
never a thought.
No, I hadn't thought about it. I didn't really, growing up in Sebastopol, people are like, that must've been why. And I was like, no, but we grew up with apples, and it wasn't really talked about even. It wasn't really a part of, there was no program certainly at high school, maybe even at the JC that had winemaking. So it was still like kind of a, maybe this is over in Napa thing, but it wasn't on my radar. But then when someone said that, I was like, yes, this is
kind of appealing.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd never felt more like a little kid.
Yeah.
Than when I was there making wine.
And so why were they asking you that question?
I think they were one of the tourists who were there, and they were just interested in, what brings an intern here? Why do they want to do what they're doing? And I didn't have much of a reason besides it sounds like fun to go spend some time in Italy
totally,
and not sit at a desk.
Yeah.
But I did go back and I worked at for a solar panel installation company back in LA for a little bit. Saturday desk.
What year was that?
That was 2003, maybe two or three.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, I can't sit at a desk. I mean, I sit at
a
desk.
What did you weren't going door to door. You were actually.
No, I was the one
doing
who was
administrative stuff.
Yeah, administrative, like processing all of the permits and rebates and all that stuff.
Okay. Which noble cause.
Noble cause.
Right?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, we got solar put on a couple of years ago.
Yeah. No, it's important. It's important to have that. But for me, I was just like, it was a big workload and I was the only person in the office. And I was kind of like, I've never been one who wants to sit behind a desk, even though I do it plenty now, quite frankly.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. We all do.
But it's a byproduct of the other thing that you want to do.
Totally. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not like you're just sitting at a desk trying to,
Yeah. And to each their own. I think some people enjoy that work, but I definitely wanted to make things with my hands.
Right.
So
what's the next move? Leaving the solar?
I started just looking online. I found Wine Jobs, which is around back then, and just saw that there was an internship at Chalk Hill in Sonoma County and outside of Healdsburg. Yeah. And I had no wine knowledge, but they called me up, and I mean, I'd worked at this place in Italy, so I definitely during the interview.
Did you throw that out there?
Well, I put it on my resume.
Right.
I'm out of college. What do you put on a resume? All you have is a 3-month internship.
Right.
And I worked throughout college, but I'd worked as a dental and orthodontist assistant, which is another thing. But
interesting.
Yeah, fell into that. But they call the Jordan Fiorentini, who was the one who hired me. You know her?
Shout out to Jordan.
Oh, I love Jordan. She definitely holds a place in my heart as one of the people who inspired me or believed in me, or, kind of was like a example that, women can be in this space, which was very cool. So smart, so precise. And she, she's relatively young when she hired me, maybe 28, 29, but she seemed like the sage person to me at the time.
Right.
As a 22-year-old or something,
and so what were you were just doing classic engine stuff? You had a squeegee and a hose and digging out tanks, whatever they told you to do. I did work
on at Chalk Hill. They were doing, so they actually did native fermentations for the way they started all their Chardonnays, which I don't think is really talked about that much, because it's more of like a, it's between a commercial and like it's not as commercial as, say, the Gallows of the world. Right. But, there was a little bit more recipe driven, I would say, winemaking. Right. But I loved everyone who worked there. And so they put me in charge of this, but they're making really, strong 15% alcohol Chardonnays, maybe a little bit more than what was on the label.
Right.
And, they had to get them to finish. So I was working on this like yeast propagation program that we would put in at 5 bricks. So it would go native until 5 bricks. And then so they got a lot of the benefits of a native fermentation. Yeah. But then you could achieve this higher alcohol level.
Can we talk about that for a second? Yeah. So I know, you do all native fermentation on your wines. So I had a couple questions. One was, what happens if you get a stuck fermentation in one of your wines?
Yeah, it's happened a couple times, which is actually a lot of people who don't work with native fermentations. They often think that like, oh, this is a huge problem. Right. It's not, so working at a place that did use yeast like Chalk Hill. Right. And then my experience, kind of same amount of stuck fermentations. Like, but I think your fruit has to be super clean. Yeah. Going back to the wanting to work in warm climates. Right. Where you get like, very clean. No
mildew pressure.
Yeah, no mildew pressure, exactly. But what I would do is usually we would have some other fermentation coming in a little bit later. So if it seems like it's sticking, take it off the lees. If you have temperature control, you can try to warm it up, cool it down, whatever it needs, depending on what you think's going on with the wine. And then putting it back over other lees or over other skins.
A little jump start.
Yeah. So kind of borrowing from other fermentations that are happening that are a little healthier. Or sometimes you have to wait.
Right.
We have done a buildup before. This is the only time we've added like sugar to something, is where you take the juice, you warm it. Not that we've pitched yeast in, but we've put in, I'm trying to remember if we used yeast hulls, which is like dead yeast. I think we just were able to use lees from our own wines. Right. And then a little bit of sugar and just try to get it started that way, almost like you'd start a sourdough starter or something. So,
and the other thing I wanted to ask is why was it so important to you for native fermentations? And let me, I made wine one time with one of my friends. I'm not a winemaker, and so let me tell you what my thought process is, and you tell me if this is totally bananas. Is when you're using natural yeast, this is how it was sort of explained to me, is that you have sort of like a what do they call that? A relay race, where it's someone passing a baton.
Oh, that's such a good analogy.
And so one is dying off and it's passing the baton to another one. And so you're building complexity of flavors as the natural yeasts are dying off and then passing on to the next one, as opposed to using a commercial yeast strain that sort of is just a sprinter that just wants to get to the finish line quickly. Mm-hmm. Is it kind of true?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great analogy, and I've never heard that. So I love it. I might have to use that in the future. Yeah. But it's it's kind of, I've always thought of it more because I come from an environmental studies background, is like the way that the clearing land part is the first part of the analogy is where it breaks down a little bit. But like, say you clear land, and at first, like, certain, we call them weeds, but they're just plants that are there to like replenish the soil, pop up. And then next comes maybe grasses, and eventually the final state is a forest. But I think of it that way too, where it's like kind of, you can't go straight to the forest. You've got to build it up over time.
I like that one.
Plant supports another one. So, it's, I mean, I've also heard it described as like a chorus versus a solo voice. Right. If you're into music. What percentage do you feel like is actually coming from the grapes in the vineyard as opposed to what's in the facility that you're making the wine at? Yeah. I would add in a third component, which is just the winemaker. And I know, most of us try to say, we're just shepherds. We want to make sure the fermentation goes well. But I say this only because now, so I started off working in my friend's parents' basement when we started the label in Orinda. I was working with,
using like carboys or barrels?
So my friend's his parents' home, they bought a lot in Orinda that was kind of like almost like a ravine, a dry ravine, and they built the house above it. So they had like a basement that had 14-foot ceilings.
Nice.
Yeah. So we
no one has basements here.
No, I know.
So that's amazing.
It was amazing. Yeah. And his dad is a contractor and put in like ports for drains because he thought maybe he'd turn it into like a little unit for his parents or something. Yeah. That never happened, but we made it into a winery. Yeah. Which is incredible. I mean, a winery where we had to like pitchfork grapes down like a water pipe into the basement. It was definitely, it's good. We were really young.
And are you using like an old press, or
we got a little bladder press down there. I mean, like a drum press. Yeah. Yeah. He had like French doors. So the double doors, we could just squeeze it through. It was a baby one. And and we got like an old tank that I think William Selliam had used, one of those like kind of, they're like almost like milk tanks cut in half.
How did you get that?
So one of my other friend's dad worked in the industry. Okay. And so
you're getting some hookups here and there.
Or at least some like relationship hookups, which is huge. Yeah. Right. But also just kind of asking around and trying to figure out how to put it together. Anyway, so started there. So have that. And then I made wine 1 year. I was assistant winemaker at Brock Cellars while I was getting the project off the ground. And in 2016, made wine there.
Sorry, we should give a little to Brock Cellars.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Also amazing person.
Yeah.
He was kind enough last minute when my other situation fell apart to let me make wine there, even though it wasn't really part of the deal. So he helped me out there. And then in 2017 moved to Richmond, to that facility kind of out near where Purity makes wine. And at the time it was Chad Hines from Method Sauvage, myself, purity. We're making wine there, and then packs. So anyway, lots of different terroirs, lots of different environments.
But what was the first wine that you were doing in the basement? Where did you get the grapes? What were they?
So some of the grapes I still work with. This is Carignan from Venturi Vineyard.
Okay.
Up in Calpella, just north of Ukiah. Old Vine Carignan. It was Neradavola from Fox Hill.
Okay.
And then...
Wait, there's more than two? So your first time making wine, you're not like, let's just make one thing. You wanted to like...
Oh yeah, that.
Do multiple.
Oh yeah, and we made. I also made a Solera sparkling. So, which is like, talk about anti-cash flow.
Okay.
And
sparkling, which is completely different from everything else.
Yeah, yeah. But I had been interning. You know, skip from Chalk Hill ahead. I had been interning for, I don't know, about eight vintages between when I started and when I started the business. So
you knew you could handle it.
Yeah. I mean, I would have done more had I had any more money. I was
space.
basically coming back to student loans. I had been a little more frugal than what the student loan had expected when I was in college.
Right.
And I'd gotten a couple grants because I switched over to a graduate degree when I was at Davis. So I used that money to kind of buy grapes.
Nice.
So when you're young and you can't qualify for any sort of business loan or anything else.
Yeah.
So it was actually kind of a blessing for me to get a jump start.
So what did you do with those first wines that you made? Because where you were making them, I'm assuming was not exactly legal, right?
No, we got it legally
Seriously?
bonded. Yeah. Yeah.
Wait a minute. In Sonoma, that would take like 14 years to get that done.
Arinda had no idea. We took it to the city. So myself and Chant and Julien were doing the, who makes Populous in Leyloon now. He and I took it to the city and they were kind of like, I mean, the city of Arinda is tiny and they'd never been petitioned. I mean, it's like a bedroom community. Like it's not.
And how much did they say they needed to, like, did you have to write them a check or anything, or you just had to sign paperwork?
I can't even remember. If we wrote them a check, it was tiny. I can't remember if we wrote them a check. It was basically like, okay, I guess if the federal government says you can do it.
Right.
Sure. But we were driving flatbeds of trucks up these like windy hills past these homes.
And neighbors aren't complaining at all?
You know, I think the neighbors were friendly enough. But there were definitely, some people walking their dog and we'd be coming around the corner with a flatbed.
Yeah.
So
they knew something was going on.
Yeah, they were like, well, what? Who? I think they just thought that a lot of these trucks were lost, or like that Google Maps wasn't working properly or something.
You have no signal.
Exactly. Yeah. I just kind of wave, and they're like, "Oh, there's the young truck driver doesn't know what."
Okay, so they're legal wines. You're getting labels done by TTB. Yeah. You're actually and so as a beginner. Martha making her own wines. What is your idea for how you're going to sell the wine?
Well, so a lot of those internships that I thought were just about learning how to make wine actually proved to be really helpful in this regard. So I worked with, in 2012, and 2014 was the first vintage we made in this Arinda basement. But in 2012, I worked for a winemaker called Giusto Occhipinti, who makes Kos. Yeah. And he like brought me definitely into the fold. A lot of other places I'd worked, it was like, okay, you do the cellar work and the vineyard work, and then we have separate, the winemaker is off doing things. But he'd invite me to dinners. He would, any times he had guests from, abroad or people visiting. So I met a few distributors that way. Cool. But also my friends had gone and worked, like Chant, who I mentioned, had worked for Valette in France. And he, I think, was brought in by Zev Rovine, this New York distributor who was just starting kind of a natural wine distribution company. Okay. So they, I think Valette said, oh, Chant had worked with him for a year. So, he was really close. He lived in their house for a year. And so I think.
So you had a little street cred. They were like, hey.
Yeah, they were like, okay, there's all these young people who've done these, awesome apprenticeships. And let's try this. So, that year we had Zev into the basement. We had the farm wine import.
Sounds so wrong.
Yeah, exactly. We invited him
had
to the
Zev in the
basement. We invited Jeff Vieira, who was working for Farm at the time, Farm Wine Imports in California. Oh. And he got to taste the wines, and Pascaline Lepeltier, an amazing sommelier from New York, came and visited. Yeah. So it was cool. There was a lot of energy around.
What a cool community.
Yeah, it was a cool community and a lot of energy around maybe people were looking for a little like revitalization in California wine too. I don't know.
Was New York a little bit ahead of that? And I kind of think of New York and Southern California as a little bit more ahead of that scene. And maybe it's because we make wine here. And so we have like the traditional gatekeepers sort of not wanting it to be a thing. But
I could see that. I did get the most when I was talking about what I was doing. The most blowback was definitely when I was like at Napa trade fairs, like looking at equipment, and talking to people, and they're like, oh, good luck with that. Right. So, which is fine. Everyone has their own opinion.
And what percentage, were you just throwing it all into distribution, or were you trying to get some local placements? Or
we got some local placements. We were friends with a couple. We, went out and drank wine a lot at different wine bars. And so, but we did start distribution from day one. But we also, I'm trying to remember, I think maybe, we're like selling it to friends who wanted to buy it, but we didn't have like a DTC outlet. Yeah. When the four of us who started that business split, and I started selling wine in 2017 under Martha Stoumen Wines, I started DTC right away.
Yeah.
I made sure I got the permitting and. Yeah.
And how do you do that? So do you have a friend that does your website, or did you do that yourself?
I did everything myself.
No shit. Yeah. I like your website.
Oh, well, now I don't. Yeah. Okay. Let me back up. My original website. Yeah, it looks better now than it. Actually, though, maybe I'm biased, but I thought it looked okay. So I'd like take my bottle shots, with my phone and do the website. I
mean, iPhones are amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And fulfill all the orders and do all the licensing and
Now it's compliance. That's the kind of thing that I have zero interest in.
Oh yeah, it's a drag. People are like, it's too complicated, and it's not. I think it's doable. It's just so time consuming.
Right.
So
and it's dealing with people that are sitting at desks.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. If you are doing your own compliance. If there's anyone out there, the rare person who's listening to that podcast who's like, I do.
We have a lot of,
Yeah. Or if you're new to it, I would just always recommend calling people, because like it's, the email's back and forth, but if you can get someone on the phone or going in, like the local ABC office, when I've gone in, everyone's super friendly and super helpful.
Oh, cool.
Which is great.
Yeah.
So I know it gets a bad rap because it's like, talk about, it feels like you're wading through molasses. Basically.
Yeah. Well, and it's that all the different states have different rules and all this kind of crap.
Yeah. We were working with a compliance firm who's great and efficient, but just like from a time perspective, I think it was 2 years ago I was looking, and this was probably like, I think it was 20% of our expenses went to compliance.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I'm talking about expenses including like grapes and everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the idea is that you're building the foundation, and hopefully that sort of pays off long term, right?
Yeah, exactly. The renewals are a little easier, but I say that not doing them. Anna Zapaltas, who does it for my business. Thank you so much.
Oh, cool. Will you talk a little bit about your team? Anyone you want to sort of...
I feel like all of them are really incredible. So Tim Lyons, I mentioned, who's started out as assistant winemaker. He's associate winemaker now. He's taken over some more of the...
Tell me the difference between assistant winemaker and associate winemaker.
I think it's a little bit more... He's taken over some of the logistics things that like buying glass and purchasing, making sure the labels are on time and that sort of stuff. Right. So
that's important stuff.
Yeah, very important stuff.
Otherwise, you're doing things 2 and 3 times.
Yeah. So I've slowly taken things off my plate, and he came on board in 2018, and I told him then, and he's amazing, that I was, quite frankly, part of the reason I wanted him on board at that moment is because I started thinking about having a family, and I said, who knows when this is going to happen, and if I'm out during harvest, we worked and we still work very, very closely together. So I feel like we have
someone to rely on.
Yeah, not the same sensibilities exactly, but pretty darn close. I feel like 95% overlap in terms of what we would both judgment calls we'd make.
And the other 5% you could kind of deal with.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. It's he likes that wine, and that's his favorite wine in our lineup, and that's my favorite wine, and it's good. It's good for a little bit of that.
And then you have, who else does work for you? You have
So Alyssa Julian, who does all of the kind of marketing, digital, whatever's out in the world, whatever you've seen.
Yeah. You do a good job.
Thank you. Yeah. We put a lot of energy and probably any sort of money that I ever made, first it would go into making more wine as we grew it, but any excess would go into trying to build the marketing because it's just so important.
Yeah, I think you're kind of, in a way, you're sort of out there spending the money that maybe other people don't have, getting the message out.
Yeah, hopefully. I do feel, to be totally just frank, I do feel like in hindsight, I was like, you probably should have prioritized giving yourself a real salary before you spent money on marketing or something like that.
A lot of people say that when they start their own business, that, that's one of the first things you're supposed to Yeah. People are like, I've written myself a check in 10 years or something.
Yeah. So that was a lesson that hopefully is learned and But yeah, it was I early on, so in 2017, that early kind of leftover. I mean, it was a few $1,000s that I had left over from student loans, and then that went into grapes for 1 year, and I was selling wine, but it wasn't enough to really go full time for myself.
Right.
So I got 3 minority investors to sign on in 2017, and one of them was really an amazing mentor too. He kind of coached me through. I've never raised money. I don't come from a business family or anything like that, and he kind of coached me through it. His whole interest was that he likes, helping young people grow businesses, which is a great investor to have who's not interested in the return.
Quarterly profits.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing like that. Always so incredibly helpful. And he said, put out there what you really want. What do you want from this exchange? Is it just money? That's fine if it is. But if you also want advice, make sure that's known. What types of advice would you need to run a business? And it was so helpful for me. So he was one of the people who was like, I would put money into marketing, if you can, as soon as you have it. And I felt that way too, coming through this 8 years of apprenticeships prior to starting my own business. I mean, I worked in pretty scrappy cellars that made, in my opinion, some of the, most exciting wines in the world. And it's you need really great grapes and well-farmed grapes and not that much else, and some hard work, I think, to make good wine. But you don't need fancy equipment I have none of that, quite frankly, and just, really trying to.
But even your marketing, part of it is that your labels are amazing.
Oh, well,
I mean, they're eye-catching, and so they caught my attention, because you've been at Bottle Barn, I'm sure, when you're looking at, 7,000 bottles of wine, when things stand out.
Yeah.
How did you first get the idea for your labels and who does them? And
So
and talk about the Valdegui too.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about the Valdegui, which is, I mean, you can't see it if you're listening, but one of my favorite labels.
We'll post pictures.
Yeah. It's so labels are by an artist named Carolyn Haydu. She is somebody who, an artist. She lived on the top floor of this shared Berkeley house, and I've known her since I was in high school, but actually she ended up being my roommate when I was getting this business off the ground. Okay. And it was a very artistic, amazing shared house we lived in. And I just remember I was thinking when I was making wine, what are kind of like the tenets or the things to really focus on? And I feel like people talk so much about, flavor and aroma. And I think people are starting to talk about texture too, but texture I feel like is like kind of the soul of the wine. And so I just loved how textural all of her pieces were. And also at the time, there was a lot of kind of black and white labels or labels with just kind of script on it. And my whole reason for starting a business was because I wanted to show what other sides of California. I didn't even want to start a business, quite frankly. That was not my goal. I just wanted to make this type of wine, and I didn't see...
You were hoping someone was just going to show up and said, here's a wine production facility, here's a bunch of money, just do your thing?
Well, I mean, if someone had done that, maybe.
I would like that.
Yeah, if someone had done that, maybe. But I don't think, there's you got to give a proof of concept for people to usually hand over money that way. So, I just was like, I got to build this if this is the framework I want to work under. Yeah. I'm just got to build myself.
And what's the deal set up with the artist? Is it you get to...
She owns the artwork.
Okay.
And it's on... perpetual lease on the bottle.
Cool.
So, yeah.
And what a great business card. I worked at Imagery Winery back in the early 2000s. And I always, they would have different artists do all the labels. And I thought, what a cool thing if you were an artist to be able to, hand people a bottle of wine that had your artwork on it.
Yeah.
And that was actually the first time I had Nero. I think it was at Imagery. I don't know where the Benzigers were sourcing that fruit from at the time, but we had Lagrine. Mm-hmm. We were into some weird stuff back then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. There have been some, I feel like, stalwart producers. And I think sometimes with this younger wave, of which I kind of feel like I'm on the older side of now, but younger wave of producers, you kind of people forget that there's been people who've been making these, other varietals for a while.
Yeah.
Thank goodness that's why they exist. And that's why we were able to purchase them because...
Yeah, the only time, I've heard stories of Napa Gamay or Valdegui, but the only time I've ever had one was from Martha at Talisman. Mm-hmm. And it was so funny that they did all Pinot Noirs and then a Valdegui.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at the Girl and the Fig, I was researching it because I was trying to find, they do only Rhone varietals on their wine list, and I was trying to find a way to make it a Rhone varietal. And so I found a spot in the Rhone where they had a little bit, and I was trying to convince them that no, it's a Rhone varietal.
You totally, I feel like you get away with it. No one knows where Valdeguy's from.
Totally.
Napa Gamay. It's one of my more favorite grapes that grows in California, originally French, as you mentioned, but I don't think it's really widely planted there. It's not widely planted here, but it's pretty light bodied. Again, one of those
juicy.
Yeah. Juicy, produces a heavy crop when it's young, but as it gets gets to be an older vine. These are also from Rossetti Vineyard, planted in the late 1940s. It just close to Gamay, but it has its own fingerprint. I actually brought this vintage 2022 because it was one of those vintages that was split. It was hot in the beginning and then rainy and cold towards the end. And this ripens quite late. The vines are old, they're virus, but also I think, it's usually more mid-season, but late season for those reasons. And I always think about this as like more of like a watercolor painting. For me, I was almost like, it's pretty saturated. They're dry farm vineyards, but after the rains, it does dilute the grape a little bit. And I'm used to working with these dry farmed, intense, super precise. Yeah. And I actually, it's like, let's keep it, let's age it, let's see what happens. And the aromatics, before we bottled it, were just so enticing for me. Yeah. Like there's a little mineral, a little rose petal. I don't know. I just loved it for its aromatics. And I thought that's what it can be, but I have to let people know that that's what it is.
So you mean it's a little bit different than your other vintages?
Yeah.
If they were expecting the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think here at 16600 are going to end up, we did a little 21 versus 22 side-by-side tasting a couple weeks ago, and the aromatics and the elegance and the prettiness of the 22s is really evident. And I, people will talk a lot of shit about that vintage. But I think they're these really pretty wines.
I love it. Yeah.
And I think release them now. Mm-hmm. Let's start drinking them.
Totally. Yeah. For me, this wine feels very ethereal. We didn't make that much of it. It feels like kind of, anything that is very delicate and very like aromatically driven. That's kind of a moment, and it also can disappear quickly. Yeah. But I really think they're beautiful. Yeah. I was again hesitant, but it's like, can you be too delicate? I guess not if.
No, this wine's delicious.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. And but it's just, one of those things I'm not the type of winemaker that's just like, I just make what I want to drink and fuck everyone else, because I want people to enjoy things. Like that's the point. It's to bring pleasure to people. And
joy.
And joy. So, yeah.
How many different varietals are you working with right now?
Oh gosh. Varietal wise, I'm going to throw a number out there because
just in general,
but probably 12 to 14. And cool. I make maybe 15 to, apparently Nina Kravitz, who's working in marketing with me in 2021. She was like, so you made 21 different cuvées in 2021. Is this trend going to continue over the years? And I was like, okay, I'll rein it in a little bit, but yeah.
I mean, what is the smallest case production and the largest on those different wines?
Well, this Val de Guy, I think, was 46 cases.
Yeah.
So tiny.
Yeah.
And then, most of those wines are around 100, maybe up to like 250 cases. So, and then the post-sortations are more like the rosé I make is not huge, it's maybe 600 cases, and the white's about 1,000, and then the red's about 2,500 cases.
Right.
Did that add up? I think so. But,
it never does.
Yeah.
Will you talk about farming a little bit?
Yeah.
Who you're working with and why?
Yeah. So despite kind of, experimenting with new wines every year or making different things, I actually work with the same farmers for the most part, year in and year out. And a lot of them are older Italian families. So mostly outside of kind of Napa and Sonoma, because it's where a lot of these old vine dry farm vineyards haven't been pulled out yet. Right. And it was actually a lot of these like kind of Italian American families coming in, most of the families I worked with, their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, all, whenever they immigrated here, it was like mid to late 1800s. And when the family established here, and then the farms have been handed down over the generations. So I know that tells you nothing about the farming yet, but I feel like it really sets the scene.
No, it's important. I know you talked about that. You like working with families.
Yeah. It's great. And they know the land so well. Yeah. And, a lot of people live next to their properties. So they're out, Pamela Rossetti, Rossetti Vineyards, one that I work with. Rosalind works there too. Patrick's worked there before. Oh my gosh, I just saw what you opened.
I thought we had to try some of this while you were here.
Sorry. I will talk about farming, but this is amazing. I'm so excited about this. I was actually, as I was drifting off to sleep maybe 2 or 3 nights ago, I thought, do I have any Leon Bras left that I brought back? Because I was kind of like...
I was wondering what the last vintage you probably had was.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think it was... I've had some, more recent vintages, but the last vintage I actually drank, I think, was probably wine I brought home from then. So it was there in 2013, so it was probably like a 2011, 2010.
Cool.
Yeah. This is really cool. But I was thinking to myself, I thought, I think I drank through all the bottles I brought home. It's like, let me scrounge around.
How many did you bring home?
I only brought home 6.
Okay.
So it was,
So you've been savoring them.
Yeah, I've been savoring them for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But, but this act of farming that's really, I think philosophically based in, or at least the way I think about it, is like how I strive to raise a child, which is like you put in a lot of love and energy when they're young, but like also teach kind of resilience. So what that means in terms of farming is, I work with a lot of dry farm vineyards. I lease a small vineyard that's younger vine, but it's also dry farmed. And we've planted out new dry farm plantings, and it's a lot of work to get them established.
Right.
You grow the rootstock first, you do some mass selection grafting, and then, it took us 6 years to get any fruit.
Yeah.
So, but then you see these vines that last, we don't even know how long.
Yeah, who knows,
Prohibition.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Took a lot of them out, but for a long, long time. So.
And when you say you're leasing vineyards, what do you mean? You mean you're in a long-term contract for getting fruit from them, or you're actually...
I lease the property, so I can grow whatever I want there is the term. I mean, each lease is a little different, but, and I only have one lease now at this point. I had 2, but it was too much for me to handle.
Right.
And, I originally was out there trying to do some of the pruning myself, and was like, even with 5-acre vineyard, I was like, I'm not going to get this done in time. So I actually work with a farmer named Peter Johnson, who also has an old vine dry farmed vineyard. He's a 4th generation farmer up in the area, and he has crew and he has equipment, and he has a year-round crew because he also grows pears. So great for me to...
we just got a little note. So if you haven't realized why is Tristan so quiet? Because we had a group come in here to the tasting house to do a tasting. So Tristan was very nice to go handle them, but you can tell he's still very engaged in the show. He's passed Martha a little note. So what I wanted to kind of get at with the farming is how important is it to you? Not only that it's, I know you like working with families, but in terms of organic farming, is that like a hard stop? Like if they're not farming organically, you won't work with them?
I work with one small parcel that's not farmed organically.
Right. Not certified organic or not farmed organically in general?
Not farmed organically in general. So he uses synthetic fungicides, and it was a discussion around, for me, I would say, everything else is, full stop, needs to be organic. And I'm, a realist in that I personally just try not to work in these areas that have higher mildew pressure, but he is in a higher mildew pressure area.
Okay, so that's the reason.
And it's about, tractor passes, what he would have to do with sulfur dust.
Right.
It just, it doesn't, the harm outweighs the good in that regard. So, he can make fewer passes and he uses synthetic fungicides. But for me, it was a full stop. Like, he had been using Roundup in some other parcels, and I said, I won't work with you if you use herbicides and, any sort of like pesticides, like, neonicotinoids or anything like that. Like that's a full stop for me.
They sound like so much fun though.
I know. Don't they?
Don't sound harmful at all.
What's your drug of choice?
Totally. Yeah. There is a reason. I love all the names on the drugs on TV, you know, when they have the commercials. I always wanted to be in one of those rooms where they're trying to decide the name for the new drug that they're putting out, because it's got to be something that's kind of catchy and maybe can go to an old Motown song and they can replace one of the words. You know what I mean?
For sure. I know.
But it has to sound kind of like it's synthetic. It's such a weird job, I'm sure.
I feel like actually pesticides are the same way. I mean, they're not, they're not, you know, on TV, but if they were, they would definitely have a jingle.
That would be kind of fun one day, just to do our own little commercial for some of these herbicides or pesticides, promoting them in a tongue-in-cheek sort of way. Right.
May give you anal discharge. And
my daughter loves that. So she's 16. She's so confused by watching the commercial, and then may have rectal bleeding and blah blah blah. And she just rolls. She's like, "Why would anyone take that?" I'm like, "Well, what if you had like a liver disease?" I don't even know why. I can't explain it to her. But I'm like, if you had to take these drugs, they by law have to let you know that you may experience these issues, and even if it's totally contrary to the reason that you're taking the drug, like you're taking it for your eyes, but then it may screw up your eyes. Totally. She's so baffled by the whole thing.
Yep, I remember that as a kid. And it's probably, you know, there's some truth in it.
Right, from the mouth of babes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're smarter than all of us, actually. Yeah. So are you always open to new sources for grapes? Or have you kind of put a cap on yourself right now?
Just like, right now. Yeah. I mean, what
do you think about what's going on? I mean, I wanted to kind of lead with this question, but we try not to get doom and gloom. And we're very small here at 16,600, so we're 3,000 cases.
Okay.
But we go to DTC symposiums and things like that. And so we hear all of this stuff, and we have a lot of friends that are in the industry. And so, you know, we hear the negative stuff. But we don't really know what to make of it, because we're not affected in a lot of ways by the same things.
Yeah.
I don't know what
I make of it. Or
I mean, I've heard 40 different reasons for what's going on, and it may just be a combination of all of them, or it might be none of them. I have no idea.
Yeah. I think it is, a combination of most of the reasons people have said, you know. Financial considerations for people who are buying wine, aging, you know, demographic shifts.
White Claw, Truly, legalized cannabis, no room in your cellar to buy any more wine. People don't have cellars. The pandemic caused people not to go out to eat, and the culture around food and wine has sort of disappeared in a lot of ways. DoorDash, blah, blah, blah.
I do think the restaurant culture, we are so connected with what's happening with restaurants. And, you know, you read these opinion pieces from restaurateurs, but they're truthful in that, you know, it's a rough road right now for them. And so
in businesses that are already running on razor thin margins.
I do feel like there is, I don't know, whenever I think about, what's going on in the wine world, I always try to look outside the wine world too, of like, what's the like kind of macrocosm that we're all part of. Right. And I do feel like there is a shift happening right now. I felt like there was like, for the past 10 years, there's been a little bit of like a craft renaissance where it's like, yes, buy local,
spirits
buy small.
And beer and farmers markets.
And farmers markets and the small producer. And then I think, you know, a combination of all these factors, but inflation and a few other things has like made it hard for small business people. And, and I feel like there's a little bit more of a shift towards just buying from corporations. Like, it's like we've all kind of been worn down a little bit and like finally thrown in the towel and buy from Amazon or whatever.
You're going to Walmart and Costco. And,
I don't know. Or maybe it's kind of a guess.
And then all the big companies buying up all the small ones. And then at some point, you know, when they're having to show quarterly profits to their shareholders and they've cut back all the possible fat off the bone that they can possibly do, what are you left with?
Yeah. Well, wines, I really, really, really strongly feel like there should be no publicly traded wine companies.
Yeah.
It's like the quarterly shareholder thing, beholden to shareholder. It's just not something that's runs on quarterly cycles.
Right.
We, especially in California, we have like, 7-year drought periods, and that affects what we make. And it's like, we're on, maybe 10-year cycles or something.
Yeah.
And you really have to be in it for the long haul. Part of the reason I like working with family farmers, they understand these prolonged cycles and,
Right.
try to talk to, some of my older growers, and some are a little downtrodden, a lot of fruit's been, for whatever reason, whether it's, fire to pandemic to, soft market this year, that a lot of fruit goes unpicked, and most of them are just like, they're ups and downs. That's what you sign on for with farming. And
yeah, right. The pendulum swings is kind of the thing. And I think, it's just sort of swung to the left right now.
Yeah. I hope people want to drink wine. I hope it's, people
it's been around for a while.
Yeah. I get targeted ads sometimes. I'm not really on social media that much these days, but I think because, Martha Stoumen is the brand and myself too is all one, but I'll get targeted ads about like, are you trying to drink less? And I'm like, no, God damn it, I'm trying to drink more. I'm trying to get together with friends more. I'm trying to drink more wine. I'm trying to bring in, again, this like 3-dimensionality into life, this excitement. I don't know. On my way here, I was listening to a podcast, an Ezra Klein podcast about the Sabbath, and I didn't grow up religious. I'm not religious at all, but there's something appealing about the way they were talking about this like collective buy-in to adhere to a certain like schedule around rest.
Right.
Like, if your competitor's open on a Sunday or whatever day of the week, it doesn't have to be Sunday, but if your competitor's open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, then you feel like you have to be.
Right.
And kind of this like, but if we all do it together, it's not just rest that we need. It's like we need rest to be exciting and pleasureful.
Right. Well, and it's the work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of out of whack here as opposed, you spend time in France and Italy where it's...
Yeah, where, again, they kind of have this collective calendar. Like, if they're doing siesta, shops are closed.
Yeah.
Like, shops are just not open on certain days. I've heard that is eroding a little bit there too, which makes me sad to hear. But it's like, we always wonder, I always wondered, I was like, why can't we just cultivate this culture in the U.S. of, enjoying our lives a little bit more and not being, and I am like a recovering workaholic. I work all the time and I need to stop. But like, where's the, and it's almost like you need everyone else to be doing it as well.
Right. And I kind of get the sense that there's some sort of reckoning coming. You can see it with people on strike right now.
Yeah.
I think people feel like they're being pushed a little bit too hard, and at some point there's a snap.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. So we'll see. And with the recent election, it's going to be. Oh, by the way, Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
This 2025. That's right. Let the games begin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, overall, despite what's happening in the industry, I think, again, I've tried to think about what's causing it, but I've like kind of let that fade away. I'm thinking more about how to like fortify my mind from being susceptible to like being blue or doomsday or things like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with, for anyone who's not in the wine industry who's listening to this, we get industry news, daily news, and it's all really negative. It's really, really negative. So we are in our own little negative news cycle around the industry right now. And, not to say it's not true, like these things, but just a lot of the stories are just make you feel bleak. And I tried to talk to my team about this in the very beginning of the year. when we started to see these stories rolling in more and more, and it's just kind of like, okay, what can we do? I've thought about this just in my own life. What can I do? And it's like during the pandemic, we went through this time where we were trying to shield ourselves completely from any physical harm,
Right.
you know, like isolate our bodies.
Right.
But we completely opened up our minds to anything anyone wanted to feed us on the internet. And it's like, okay, we need to have a little bit, I just feel like we need to think a little bit more about what we're letting into our brain.
Brain pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost in a way,
I think we're in a
right?
brain pandemic
Like
where
a
we're
helmet.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, now you get to be in charge of what you let into your brain
Yeah.
because it will affect you.
Or at a minimum, the realization that 90% of it is skewed or bullshit anyway.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
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 And it's not a representation of what's going on for the most part.
Well, that's the thing, you know,
Yeah.
people are surveyed and they're like, oh, I feel actually like my personal life is good, but the world is a terrible place.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, yeah, there are dark things happening in the world.
Yeah.
I will not say there aren't, but it's just like, how do you, I don't know, make it less frequent, like just not have,
Yeah. Have you ever tried going without your phone for an extended period of time?
I am very much of that. That's my natural tendency anyway.
Oh, cool.
Which is, but
Good for
still,
you.
even that, it's hard. I feel, it's what I want to do, but then I still feel bad a little bit about like, oh, I don't know what's going on in the world, or I don't know what's going on with my friends, or like you feel isolated, I think.
But
if you
then
don't
that also
about it.
feeds the beast too, because then if you're getting together and talking about those things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally.
You almost need to join a little friend group where you all decide to do that at the
Yes.
same time.
Exactly.
Let's drop out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do have ladies' weekends, you know, a couple times a year with friends, and we always go places where we don't have our phones. Or if we do, even if there is service, it's like nobody has on their phones. So you'd be the odd one out if you got your phone out.
Right.
You know, we're also just like a bunch of hens chatting over here. It's like there's no way there's time for a phone with all the talking that has to be done. So
That's great though, that you have people that are, of sort of like minds in a way and are willing to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we've talked about also like, you know, we have young kids
Yeah.
and we're all trying to plan for like, okay, if we, again, it's just everyone's influenced by what's around them. So if we are, you know, all of our kids are together and none of them have cell phones, it's fine.
Yeah.
But as soon as someone gets a cell phone, it's
I know. I think we said 16 initially when she was like 7.
yeah.
And by the time she was 13 or 14,
Oh yeah.
the other kids at school had gotten
For sure.
the phones, and so
yeah.
we were screwed.
I've talked to other friends.
Yeah.
Talked to my friend Dan Polsby the other day. Do you know him from? He's a Bay Area wine person, but
I don't
anyway,
think so.
he was like, "Yeah, we really fell off the wagon." Like thought, but this is a different time. My child's only 5, so I'm hoping that society. I'm not going to have the willpower to tell him.
That's the thing. Well, and you don't want your child to be the person that they're like, oh my God, so-and-so doesn't have a phone.
Yeah.
But you kind of do.
No, there's been few times that I have agreed with like public policy in Utah, but them being like, no, we don't want our kids to be on phones until they're older.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Let's try this. Yeah.
So we should mention.
Amazing.
Yeah. Wow. So this is Domaine Leon Biral, who is Languedoc-Roussillon sort of area, and you worked there for how long?
Just one season. Just
one
exactly
season.
90 days.
And how did you get hooked up there? Wow.
Wow, that's so incredible.
Yeah.
Let's see. I was drinking a lot of Kermit Lynch wines. A friend.
Who doesn't
exactly.
want to drink a lot of Kermit Lynch
I
wine?
think I got introduced to him because like my friends, so I went, UCLA, did a few internships working at wineries in the years, and then went back to school to go to Davis. Even though I was very much more in the kind of starting to get in the natural camp at that time, I thought Davis would be great in terms of like,
tells you what not to do.
Well, yeah. Also just like we took microbiology courses that didn't have they weren't telling you how to make wine. It was more just like, okay, first this species comes in and this species is susceptible to temperature, because like there are tools you do want to use a natural winemaker, mostly temperature.
Yeah. There's things you want to know.
And oxygen and things like that.
What the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
Well, I remember.
Yeah. Is that smell a bad thing if it's in the beginning of fermentation, or
Could
if
be
it's
both.
an end of fermentation, then it's a really bad thing. In the beginning, just wait for it to blow off. But those sort of things. But anyway, my friends and I, we'd drive down to Berkeley or to SF, all packed in a car, and we'd go and buy like a couple of cases collectively as students, and we'd all drink them together because we didn't have any money. But so I think Leon Barral was that way. But 2013, I went there, and it was really, I was really interested in. He works a lot with animals in the vineyard, and I think I kind of caught, because I came to wine from like a full circle agricultural systems type framework, I thought animals are really important in the vineyard.
And when you say that, so he's got like Scottish Highland cows and like sheep, and there's dogs running around herding the goats. And
gosh, when I was there, it was like 40 or 50 head of cattle, but they were all, breeds that were, maybe not indigenous might be the wrong word, but like had been for centuries in that area, that were really well suited to kind of these dry summers.
And are they walking through vineyards?
Sometimes when they weren't supposed to, yes. No, but in the winter, yes. So they, Didier, the owner now, he would say that they are pre-pruning. So in the winter, after the grapes were off the vine, he'd run the cattle through, or run them. We were doing the type of husbandry where you would build an electric fence, and the cows would graze it's like intensive grazing for 1 or 2, 3 days, and then move on.
Well, it's their hooves too, getting down and doing a little bit of digging into the soil a bit, right?
A little bit, yeah. And we work with pigs too, that would really do, like, they dig quite a bit. So if you ever want to field,
so you're not tilling,
rototill, get some pigs in there.
Right.
Well, that's going to be really uneven when you get out. But but yeah. So he was Solaires were the name of the cattle, but there was a couple different breeds actually, and he was trying to kind of back breed into the Iraq, which was like the precursor to a modern day cow. Anyway, people get into things.
Yeah, I was going to say, you totally lost me there. As soon as you go into back breeding.
Yeah, me too. I honestly, but
yeah.
And so that was a big part of my job was, installing these fences, these electric fences. But he would graze on a bunch of neighbors' properties too.
Okay.
So, he would
would he get paid to do that?
I don't think he'd get paid. It was more of a.
They were just like, hey, drop the cows off today.
They're like, hey, we want this field. We don't want to mow it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the cows are hungry anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Bring the cows.
I'm sure they were fine with it.
Yeah. And I think he did a lot of trading. Like, I can't remember if it was, I think it was, we did slaughter a steer when we were there and 2 pigs, which was an experience for me.
Are you a meat eater?
I am a meat eater.
Okay.
But it was still very, very hard to, obviously.
If you've never seen it before, I was just at my cousin's house the other day on Christmas, and they live off of Pepper Road in Petaluma. And so as kids, we got to see the pigs get killed and the cows and the chickens. But my daughter hasn't seen any of that yet.
It's pretty horrifying at any age.
But I think it's something you kind of have to know that your meat doesn't come on a piece of styrofoam wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
And then make your own decisions at that point.
Exactly.
But you should sort of know the backstory.
For sure. For
right?
sure. No, and it was these pigs talk about, he grew like ancient heritage grain, beautiful grain, just to feed these pigs. They also, they also foraged in the forest. He had this like forested hill where the pigs lived.
Fire control.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. And he would trade them. So where this winery is located, it's a little village, but it's more of a grouping of homes. There's no stores. There's no bakery, which tells you how remote it is. And if the French village doesn't have a bakery, that's how small and remote it is. So it was a lot of like, we would gather wild fennel and we'd cook meat that we had slaughtered, and we'd still go to the markets once a week.
Yeah.
But
how old are you when you're working there?
I was late 20s.
Okay.
Late 20s. So
yeah,
it was fun. I mean, it was great. Tried to make balsamic vinegar. We sorted this fruit. So this wine, it's one of the few things that he really does intensively in the winery is sort fruit. It was most of what harvest was.
Just like individual berries. He's like picking
off berries.
Yeah.
So he does most things whole cluster. His concept was that younger vine needs to be destemmed more often, but anything old vine should be done whole cluster.
And I think I had done a little bit of reading. Everything done in stainless steel?
In cement.
In cement. That's what it was. Yeah.
So it's these big cement that kind of seem like vaults, like square tanks. And the grapes every day would get kind of raked up into a pile. And then we'd take what would look like somewhere between a large battering ram and a like huge, if you took a like muddle that you'd use for cocktail making and you blew it up like a giant muddle, and we'd basically like,
what is one person holding this thing?
No, it's three people.
Holy shit. And it's not like on a cable or
no, it's three people. It's this wooden thing that he built.
Oh my God, this is medieval. This totally sounds like you're charging the gates.
Yeah, it really felt like that. It was like charging the gates into the pile of grapes. So you're kind of smashing them.
No one ever fell in, lost their balance?
Luckily, the hole was pretty small, but yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, digging out those tanks, smaller holes than I like.
Right.
Thinking of going under a house.
Right.
It wasn't.
And all the wines there are made that way in the concrete or cement, whatever.
And then he had one of these old basket presses that sits on the floor of the winery. It has little channels built into the stone of the floor. And so he makes one white, and that is...
What are the varietals in the white?
Oh, the white is... Oh, gosh.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just curious.
I'm forgetting. But there are a couple kind of like indigenous varieties. Tret Blanc, I want to say. You know what? Don't quote me on that. I'm forgetting.
Okay.
But there are a couple that are kind of... going extinct.
Oh yeah, because Tret Noir is but I've never heard of Tret Blanc.
I think it's very, very rare, and I have to look this up. I'm forgetting what the white was, but we just made basically, I think it was about one large basket press load of it, and it wasn't like he was trying to make orange wine. It just took 3 days to get any juice out of it, so it sat on the skin.
Just naturally became a skin contact.
So we'd like press it and then pull the press up and re-rake it, and because whole cluster, when nothing's fermented, it takes a while to get some juice out of it.
How do you feel about carbonic maceration or carbonic fermentations?
So I've always. Ever since I made wine, I've never wanted to do like a true carbonic. I find that's like a little too, it just shows technique a little bit too much for me.
Okay.
On the finished wine. But I do think carbonic is like an amazing process. And I like wines that usually have some carbonic components in them.
Right.
Which most kind of whole cluster traditionally fermented wines do.
But it's not something you've done under Martha Stoumen. You haven't.
No, I've never done
intentionally
like
done like
carbonic.
A,
I mean, there's certain like the vineyard I lease has some Petite Syrah on it, It has Neradavla, Negro Amaro, and a little bit of Petit Syrah. And
There you go, Tristan.
yeah. Well, I didn't say Frappato. Yeah, I'll just say Frappato and Nerello
Thank you.
Mascalese, so we got it on the record.
Thank you.
Which I don't work with yet, but I've been trying to. But anyway, it's a really tannic grape. It's on a dry farmed site that has crazy acidity, this site. And so it's like, I mean, talk about turned up to 11 plus. Right. It is really intense. So I will start that whole cluster, let it rest kind of in a sealed tank for about 3 days. But it's not true carbonic in that it's, fermenting that way.
Ish.
Yeah.
It's carbonic-ish.
Ish. Exactly. Then we'll rake out the tank and foot tread
Right.
it and put it back in, whole cluster, and get it going traditional.
Are you foot treading everything?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
A lot of it. But no, not everything.
Okay.
I do destem the Neradavla and the Zinfandel that goes into post-sortation.
And where do you get your Zinfandel from? Is it numerous sources?
It's usually just from a vineyard called Del Barba in Contra Costa, which is all grown on, it's such a cool vineyard. I need to take photos of it. It's like you wake up on a beach, but there's old vines everywhere. It's so crazy.
Sandy soils.
Very sandy. It's like sand dunes.
Yeah.
I was talking to an old grower out there, Alan Lucchese, and he's like, oh yeah, all the, city folk, the San Francisco folk, when us Italians settled out here, mostly from the Lucca area, he said they all called us sandlappers, which I don't think was a nice term, but it was like, you're going to go try to grow things out on sand dunes? Good luck.
Right.
And I feel like,
I know it doesn't seem intuitive at all.
Yeah, but like the Italian will and frugality and the there's a lot of amazing, I guess, for lack of a better word, like green thumb knowledge that's been passed down, I feel like, through generations of Italians. It's like, yeah. If anyone can do it.
Well, and the oldest vines in California are out there, right? I mean, there's the Movedra out there. It's like 130-year-old.
Exactly. It's, sand and phylloxera don't go well together.
Yeah.
So.
How do you know what I love about honeymoon? It wasn't until I had it in my glass for a couple of minutes. The minerality is really amazing.
Thank you.
And it shows up to me in a different way. I always think of when I smell a wine like that, I think of let me explain it before you get upset.
No.
I think of pool water.
Yeah.
And it's because as a kid growing up with the neighbors that had the cement pools, when we would jump out of the pool when it was 90 degrees outside, and then you'd, instead of, you wouldn't use a towel, you'd lay down on the hot cement. So it's that smell that now when I smell that in wines, I'm like, oh, that's minerality. I think of it as pool water.
I love that. I know I totally have that childhood association too.
Yeah.
For like wet concrete.
Yeah. And it's almost like the steam or something that's coming up off of it. But it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take it. Yeah. I know. I think about like with some of the, again, we don't have the calcareous soils as much here in California, but there is minerality to be found. There's like certain salinity, or there's areas in California that have like a high boron concentration, which is a salt, and it's like not great for vines at really high, but like around this area. So we talked about Contra Costa County, which is south of the Carquinez Strait, and then Sassoon is north, and I get white grapes from both sides, and they always have this kind of saltiness from, I think people think it's the boron, which is very uncommon in all the soils in the US. Sorry to get a little nerdy on you first.
No, it's fine. I was going to say a lot of the times when people talk about salinity, they're talking about their vineyards being near the coast, and it's somehow getting this. But you're saying you think it's actually in these particular vineyards actually coming from the soil.
I think it's coming from the soil. Yeah. Although I guess there is like brackish water. It's Sacramento River and San Francisco Bay close to it. But
so when I think of Sassoon, I think of Petit Syrah because they've kind of planted their flag with Petit Syrah. What white grapes are you getting from that region?
It's a small vineyard, and it includes Chenin Blanc, Vermentino, Trousseau Gris, Green Hungarian, and Golden Chasselas, and they're all planted in a small vineyard. And it was a project that Matthew Rourke started with the grower Roger King. So Matthew Rourke of Forlorn Hope. When he moved up to the mountains, he had this vineyard that he said someone should take over the buying of, and so I did. But he started it because he was reading these old texts on what like a California white blend would have looked like pre-prohibition.
Right.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So he started collecting, the Chenin Blanc was from an old vineyard up in the foothills. The Green Hungarian was like an old vine vineyard in Napa that was about to be pulled out. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit of a library block.
Totally.
Cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And so are you blending them all together?
We pick them all together and co-ferment them. Yeah.
Wait, what's the name of that wine?
It's called Out to the Meadow.
Out to the Meadow. Let's tell people how to get a hold of your wines.
Great.
So, I mean, you can just Google Martha Stoumen.
Yes. Yes.
And is it Martha Stoumen Wines, or is it, I mean, what do you...
Either, it's marthastoumen.com is my website,
Yeah,
but if
that's why I'm
if
wondering,
you do Martha
'cause
Stoumen Wines, you'll get there too.
Yeah.
So pretty easy to find. And, we do distribute, but sometimes you'll find the honeymoon out in the wild.
Yeah.
But for the most part, those smaller lot wines I talk about, they're only available on the website. We just don't make enough.
And do you have how do you do it? It's not a wine club or an allocation or a mailing list. How do you do the sales?
We don't have an allocation. We do have a wine club.
Because you're talking about some of the things you're doing, if you're doing 50 cases or something.
Yeah.
Right? Or even smaller.
the Valdegui, we have a couple cases of left. The wine club really takes most of it.
Okay.
So definitely club's the best way. But if you're curious, there are always wines available on the website for you to purchase. We want to try to make it so people can buy the wines and enjoy them and,
And then do you use one distributor for the entire country, or it's different? You're in small books?
No, we're in small books in most places. We use one distributor in New York.
Who's your one in New York? Do you know?
Skurnik Wines.
Skurnik, okay.
New York, California, and Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana now.
Yeah.
So they have a few states, but otherwise it's pretty much, small distributors in each state that we work with.
Okay.
Which is great. I mean, you get attention that way, and
that's why I wasn't familiar with your wines, because being a beverage director or saw them at a hotel or a regular sort of place, you're not having the reps that are coming in, because they're for RNDC and Young's or Southern, whatever the hell they're called now, and it's what's in their books, and of course they're motivated to sell the Chateau Saint Jean and Camus and Jordan, and that's what let's be honest, what a lot of the people are coming to visit were looking for on your wine list anyway. But as a kind of a wine nerd or wine appreciator, you're always you want to introduce people to new things.
Yeah.
And so that's why Bottle Barn was a great resource for me, because I could go there and I know, we have a couple things at Bottle Barn, and maybe you're not making, a lot of money selling to them, but I honestly think that there is some value in it, because people are finding your wines that there was no other way that they would come across them.
Yeah. I've thought about this before. I'm like, oh, should I start? I probably shouldn't put my foot in my mouth or put it out there in public until I actually pencil it out, but I'll tell you anyway.
Why not?
I've thought about that. I'm like, oh, should I start, an industry club where it's not a huge commitment, 2 wines, every 2 months or something, and discounted heavily for industry, basically.
Thomas Creek does it.
Okay.
We've thought about it, and instead we do it on a basically 1-by-1 basis, which turns into a nightmare, because what if Jasmine leaves? She's the one that has a database in her brain of who gets the industry discount and who doesn't.
Totally. We do this,
and then
too,
we're gonna
where, people write us. And
No, you're right. It would be kind of cool to have but it would be you'd have to mention it to get it. You'd be like, hey, I heard you guys do a thing. It's almost like you're getting you're going in the speakeasy, or you're getting the flyer for the underground rave party.
How do you make sure people don't just everyone doesn't show up as industry?
That's the thing.
Yeah, but I've thought about it too, because also for this moment, because I've heard a lot of the, new people coming into the industry. It was kind of pandemic was a huge break. A lot of people who were wine buyers or sommeliers or in the industry just left, and there's this whole wave.
Just curious how I think, is it Ridge that does ingredients on their bottles? Mm-hmm. And of course you would think, okay, the people that aren't going to mind it are the people that aren't putting things into their wine.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. What
do you think would happen if we did that? I kind of like to think of it like, you know.
I've always tried to take on the like, what are those T-shirts in like the late 90s? It's like no fear, like the no fear mindset that like, just don't be too scared to move into the unknown. And I think I've felt like I had to talk about this with people early on when I told them I was going to make wine this way, natural wine, blah, blah. Again, having this conversation with this person in Napa, and they're like, good luck. All natural wines are terrible and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, people are learning. There's this lost knowledge that like, you know, a lot of people made wines this way, and we have to learn again. And hopefully a winemaker gets better over their lifetime. Yeah. Anyway, or people saying, oh, well, customers just aren't ready for different grape varietals. Like they really only want Pinot and Chardonnay and Cab. And it's like, you have to kind of just have faith that you may have to do a little legwork with education and communication with your customers. Yeah. But I hope that, you know, I mentioned this offline, but you know, I would not be afraid to put ingredient labeling on my wine today, but I do wonder 10 years down the road, you know, I already see, I feel like with climate that it's getting harder to make what I think of as sound wines. So I'm not talking about consistent, like year in, year out consistent wines. I'm not interested in that personally. I want diversity of years and vintages and blends and everything. But you know, do you ever get to a point where you can't blend yourself into a stable wine? Right. Or a wine.
Well, especially with you're working in with hotter areas. Mm-hmm. Have you ever looked at NASA projection models for like Sonoma for 2050?
No, I probably should. Probably be mortified.
You would be totally freaked out. Yeah. There was a guy here, Leo Petrosky, who used to do like projection models. Yeah. And I think we had him on the show, God, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. And he scared the shit out of me. Yeah.
It's something.
It's a crazy conversation to have with grape growers. I know even, you know, Morgan Twain Peterson at Bedrock, I think, is looking into Portuguese varietals. Mm-hmm. They're looking at places around the world that he can plant things here.
Yeah. And I do work in warmer climates with grapes that are suited to it, but eventually those climates maybe become too warm. And then do these grapes need to move to the coast? And like what? Yeah. Yeah. It's a big question mark. Most of the time I've worked with grapes that maintain acidity, and actually from the Mediterranean regions they're from, we actually have so much of a diurnal shift that the acids are even way higher here in California when you transplant those varieties here. Yeah. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, I have a little too much acid in this wine.
No such thing.
I know. Thank you.
Sorry. No such thing.
But I wonder down the road, okay, if at any point I did have to add tartaric acid, which is grape derived. I personally don't have a problem with it. I drink Ridge, you know, to your point, they put it on their label. They put tartaric acid in their wine sometimes, and I'm totally fine with that. But I think it takes some consumer, you know, I'd be much more comfortable drinking a wine with tartaric acid than like PVPP, which is a plastic that is put in wine to remove certain compounds. And then it's filtered out, technically. I mean, but like, so I think it just takes a little bit more. It's hard though. I mean, as a consumer, I read stuff about food and I'm like, wait, is this good for me or bad?
Yeah, like what is it? Red dye number 5 or 30 or whatever.
Totally.
I just watched something the other day about how the French fries at McDonald's in France are completely different than the ones in the United States because they're a bunch of the shit they put in the oil to make it so they don't have to change it as often as like Skittles, that red color is
totally I'm the person who like
cancer
just bought
causing
made my son's birthday cake with like beets instead of the red 40 or whatever.
But you can use those things like you can use beet reduction in carrot and totally. So it's just a mind shift that has to happen, but it's not knowing what those things are, and so if on your ingredients, you know, if people started coming up with more fun names for the additives that they put in wine, right?
Exactly.
Then maybe they would be like, people won't notice, it'll actually sound cool.
Well, also, you know, so yes, I am the person who like used beets to dye my son's frosting on his birthday cake. But like, I also occasionally buy some Cheetos from a gas station when I'm on the road and harvest. And like, it's not, no one has to be, I don't know. I don't ever like to be too saintly about things. But I do try to like, mostly I'm big into natural fibers and that sort of thing. I like those products. So I don't know. I don't think it would be the end of the world. People who don't care as much about what's in their products would still not care as much. And those who do.
I think it'd be fun to find out.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of like, so I get this way with a lot of things where I kind of get like curiosity trumps like what may be disaster.
I just don't know if it ever, just because the people who don't want you to know what's in the wine probably have the money to pay the lobbyists to make sure that never actually becomes a real thing.
Exactly. Or the law gets diluted so much, which I think would be the worst scenario. If they're like, okay, we're all on board, we're going to put ingredients on our wines, or on wine labels, but the law gets diluted so much that you don't actually have to include most things.
Right.
Like additives that then get filtered out for the most part, or like
only things that have a residual still left in the wine,
processing aids that maybe do have some residual but not that much. That's where I think things could get kind of, because then people do think they're getting transparency and they're really not.
Right.
I'd rather have it one way or another, where it's like, you're not getting to know what's in your wine, or you really actually are.
Right. You're not getting to know. Trust me, you don't want it. All right, one last question. I heard you. It was a podcast. I think maybe one of your friends done. It was called Psychic Terroir.
Yes.
And this was back in April.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And you had mentioned that a larger wine company or group had reached out to you.
Yes.
And asked to mention something about it. Can we talk about this?
I actually don't know if I can. Still.
Okay, so
but I don't think anything's going to come.
Okay, so just they had reached out to you about an incubator program, and you were like kind of, you didn't say anything either way on this podcast, but I thought it was interesting. That a larger, probably more commercial, conventional, let's just use the word conventional company, was reaching out to you because their customers were sort of wanting a more Martha Stoumen experience.
Which is so interesting to me. From the like people who said there's no traction here, what are you doing? To the people like 10 years later, being like, no, people are interested in this.
Right. And I think your sort of argument was, hey, the bummer is that it wasn't the company that was wanting the experience. It was the customers. So it was sort of the tail wagging the dog.
For sure.
So it didn't mean that their corporate structure was in line with your philosophies. It was that they were chasing the dollars of people that...
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that gets bastardized over time. So say if anything like that were to happen, like eventually they would wear down certain practices or principles or whatever it is. And it would just kind of be a shell of like presenting as what I do, but not actually what I do. I'm sure that would happen.
Right.
But I do always wonder with those sort of things, like this is maybe my perpetual optimist, but I'm like, does that mean that they slowly do change practices? I mean, I'm talking like millimeter progress at a time.
Right.
They're not going to jump to like, oh, we only, do organic dry farming and don't add anything. But I'm like, okay, I actually don't really care if it's the tail wagging the dog. If it means that it's going to make farming grapes better in California, cool.
Yeah. And is it a specific sector of their portfolio? And then it grows if the response is good.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I saw organic Kraft macaroni and cheese, like in the store, and I thought, "Holy shit, we did it!"
Yeah. Seriously.
like the messaging finally got through to fucking Kraft.
I know. Please, if anyone out there who makes grape nuts is listening, will you please make an organic grape nuts? It's a cereal I love, but
Martha, who wants to eat grape nuts? I ate them as a kid because we weren't allowed the other stuff.
I love the pebbles.
Oh my God.
I've been reading
There's no grapes and there's no nuts in them, people. I have no idea what the hell the people who came up with that name.
I was reading my son a storybook about construction. It's like very specific construction equipment. And I was eating grape nuts the other day, and my son asked me, he's like, "Oh, are you a mobile rock crusher?"
Well, yeah, and you can hear like everything in your brain when you eat them. You can hear like echoes going on in your cranium.
I've had straight up text threads to be like, nuts or no nuts? Are you a grape nuts person or not? Anyway.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you that question because we had Dan Petrosky on the podcast, and it, like what literally he said nothing to us, and then a week later we got the text that, hey, I was purchased by Gallo for Moscon.
Oh, so this was right before.
It was,
or maybe
it
right
obviously
after,
was
but
in the works, but he wasn't able to say anything. So I'm just wondering if there's something going on you're not telling us.
No, not as of this moment.
Like you would anyway.
No, I know, I could. But I do, I will say, I do, going back to this kind of like what's happening in the industry right now, I am curious if there are some sort of, I've thought about this for many years, because I've always worked in cooperative winemaking spaces. Now I'm more custom crush, but before the spaces were always like, everyone was kind of working together to help make one another's wines. And I'm like, and originally the project with my 3 other friends, we were trying to do that. We were trying to make a business structure umbrella under which we could have our own brands, and that would lighten the load of what it means to run a small winery. Because we talked about the compliance thing earlier. All of these things, there are efficiencies to be had, and it's just, I think about inflation, farming, all these things, costs are going up. And we should be putting money into the farming. We should be putting money into certain areas. But, where is there some sort of cooperative model? Like, is there some sort of umbrella? I've thought about that too. I'm like, oh, would I ever try to make something where, I do all the licensing and then, it's like people who want to use it, maybe, they give me a very, very small percentage of sales to cover the costs of what it, does to own that licensing. And it's, no skin off them. It's only if they have the money because they made the sale type thing. I don't know. I think about all these alternative models. I think I don't know. A lot of small producers are trying to like figure that out.
Hopefully. Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any benevolent person out there who wants to be the funding behind that.
No, I've always said, I want to be a benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
Or have a benevolent dictator where I don't mind being told what to do as long as it's what I want to do anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where this all goes.
All right. The wines are beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Great chatting with you.
Yeah, good chatting with you. Thank you for coming over.
This is like every podcast that I've done, which aren't that many, where I'm always like, okay, as soon as we turn off the mic, can I ask you all the questions I wanted to ask you?
I still have a ton more questions for you, but I don't want to keep you in. I actually am supposed to be working right now. But there's a lot of things, state of the industry things about bringing in bulk juice from other countries and all these things that I would love to shoot the shit about.
Yeah,
but,
I know. It's all complicated. It's not as when you get down to the details.
Yeah. No, let's keep it simple. Martha Stoumen makes great wine. You can go on your website and get it sent to your house, I assume.
Yes.
If you live locally and you want to pick it up. Is there wine shops in the area that people can pick it up
locally, sometimes Valley has our wine if you're in Sonoma.
Cool. Yeah. We like them.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, Lauren was always she's bought my wines from the beginning when she was buyers in other places.
Cool.
Awesome. Even if they don't have my wines, you should go there.
And I might have actually tried to order a bottle of, it's Tristan in there. We were there. Maybe it was Lewandowski. It was a wine we tried to order the last time we were having dinner there, and they didn't have it. But I thought it might have been. Do you remember when we were at Valley and I tried to order a bottle and they didn't have it? Oh yeah. Yeah, I was wondering if it was Martha's wine.
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
So you might need a little placement.
Yeah. And then if you're over on the western kind of Sonoma County, it's I'd go to the Redwood. They also have
I don't know what that is.
food. Oh my gosh. Good. Make a trip out there.
Where is it?
It's in downtown Sebastopol.
Okay.
The Redwood. And they're actually, I think they call themselves a wine bar, but they're a restaurant. Like they make amazing food. Geneva, the chef there, and her husband run the place. And
okay, cool.
yeah, really great. Spinster Sisters. And mostly
love Spinster Sisters.
So
yeah.
good. We were there last night.
Yeah.
Occasionally Bottle Barn, although I've been there recently and I haven't seen as much. So
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never know what's going on there.
Yeah. I think it's one of those places where you just kind of, it's like a go in and let the adventure go where it goes and come out with more wine than you wanted, but maybe not the thing you went in there looking for.
That totally happens to me, and stay out of the back room.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Anything? What's the plans for the new year?
I am taking a little trip to Utah, to southern Utah with my husband's family. And then we are going to put our heads together. Usually my team, who I didn't get to tell you all about, but another time, we put our heads together and we have kind of like this all hands brainstorming, goal making, looking back on the past year and, giving each other, round of applause. Cause we all work a little bit remotely and it's nice to get together.
We were supposed to do that today, but with Sam being gone, and then set some new intentions.
Yeah, exactly. New intentions.
Yeah. For the new year.
And we talk a little bit too about like, fears and then hopes and stuff too. So it's a nice time to kind of unload if anybody is feeling the negative news cycle from the industry or is feeling low morale. Like,
you seem like a good boss.
Oh, I try. I sometimes am a little, I try. I try very hard with that. It's something that I don't have practice in, but I'm learning and I do care. And I think that goes a long ways.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So, yeah. Awesome.
All right, cool. Thank you guys for listening. If you want to get the wines, obviously you know how to get them, and I'll post some pictures of the wines that we were drinking today. And also the wine that the Domaine Leon Barral Didier that is available at Kermit Lynch. And if you haven't been to Kermit Lynch before, that's a fun little adventure to, you can shop online or you can show up there. They're very friendly, knowledgeable
it's a fun in-person experience.
People. Yeah. I recommend bringing cash, a certain amount that you intend to spend.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't bring your credit card.
Good wine shop that's a good practice.
Totally.
Yeah. Thank you so much for opening that. That's really special.
Oh, of course. No, we're going to drink that all night, all day today. Martha, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Totally appreciate it. Love your wines.
Thank you.
I can't think normally we do shout outs to everyone, but being that this is 2025 and we are officially, our New Year's Eve show was amazing at the Sebastiani Theater. And, I don't think we have any events at 16600 coming up until at least April. And thank God, because we have sort of event fatigue.
It's time for rest.
Yeah, no kidding. It's time to sort of recharge and then get out there. I don't know if you do pruning and suckering and all that stuff yourself, but
I've mostly handed that off to other folks. Which
good for you.
Yeah, but it is nice to have this period where everyone's just kind of like, you know what, it's time to sleep.
Yeah, taking it
Let's
easy.
be real.
All right, you guys, thanks for listening to the Winemakers. Tristan, do you want to got any shout outs for anyone since you just disappeared on us this entire show?
Terrible that way.
Mike's hot.
Everybody come to I guess this won't be out.
No, it's 2025, Tristan.
2025. Well, Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
It's going to be a great one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I feel good.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.